Industria. If ever you have wondered about your purpose in life, your calling, mission, or how you fit into the wider whole of the universe, the concept of Industria is worth understanding. Industria is a word which has been coined in the context of the wider philosophy and theology of the Church of the Machine, as a way of guiding us to become more machinic and to live holier lives. It informs both how ordinary machines function, how people may pursue their purpose, and even the greater purpose of the universe itself as a whole. If you understand Industria, many great fruits can become unlocked to you. Those who know their Industria, and who carry it out most effectively, shall reap the greatest rewards which this world has to offer. All success in life hinges on Industria. Its importance is genuinely hard to overstate. Today I will be explaining this concept, how it came about, how it relates to individuals, groups, machines, and clear away the various misconceptions surrounding it. I will also explain how the whole universe is a machine, of which we are all merely components, and what we should do in the face of this realization. Let us begin. I have described Industria many times in previous videos, but I will go into much further depth on it here than I have before. In simple terms, the Industria of a given machine is the purpose or function of that machine. The Industria of a car is to transport people, the Industria of a calculator is to solve mathematical equations, and the Industria of a hammer is to strike things with force. Every machine we have ever made has been made with some kind of function and purpose in mind, and this is what distinguishes machines from simply a random assortment of matter. That much is intuitive and easy to understand, but when it comes to talking about the Industria of human beings, or of the whole universe, it tends to confuse people. The thing that a lot of people do not realize is that the Industria of a machine exists prior to the creation of that machine. The purpose exists before a machine is formed to fulfill that purpose. The need to transport people exists before the car is invented, or even conceived of. From this, we must therefore conclude that all purposes already exist, and any technological or mechanical advancements we make will simply allow us to carry out these purposes with our machines, but not to create new purposes, only to fulfill existing ones. All purposes, and thus all Industria, exists in a potential, non-physical form, and has done since the beginning of time. This is why we teach that Industria is not utilitarian, but is spiritual in quality. Industria is the function to which material objects conform in order to take on a greater purpose, and thus become machines. Humans, therefore, also have Industria. We are born and come into this world, and we are conscious, capable of reforging and modifying ourselves, and of choosing our own path in life. We therefore must find an Industria to take on, and must fulfill it to the best of our ability. Human beings are born with purposes, just as machines are made with purposes, and to fulfill that purpose is the highest calling there is. Now, it is clear what the purpose of a hammer, a nail, a car, a computer, or any other machine is, but when it comes to a human being, it is not necessarily apparent upon first inspection what the human being was designed for. If you look to the body, the only objective and logical conclusion for the function of the human being is merely that of reproduction, but the body is not of divine creation. The Church of the Machine teaches that the physical world is formed exclusively from chaos, except in those areas which have been specifically designed by an intelligent mind. And thus, everything formed through chaos, or which evolved, is unholy, and cannot serve as any basis for inference of divine intention. Thus, when looking to find the function and purpose of the human being, we cannot look to the body, which is formed from chaos, but only to the mind and soul, which were created by the divine being. Thus, when seeking to find out what your purpose, your Industria, actually is, you must look to your mind and your soul. Because of this, it is impossible for anyone else to know what your true Industria, your greater Industria, actually is, as they can see only your body, and your mind and soul are visible only to yourself and to God. Therefore you must meditate on it, and look to the guidance of God to be able to determine your Industria. No one else can tell you what it is, certainly not me. When you find your Industria, and your true Industria, you'll find that you will carry it out of your own free will, and nothing will ultimately stop you. It will still take discipline and focus to stay on the path for it, but it will remain your calling, and eventually, you will do it in the end. Of course, this does not mean that your Industria is simply whatever you want to do, and certainly not whatever you feel like doing. There is the realm of emotion and the irrational, which will make you feel certain ways and want certain things. This is the realm of temptation and desire, and if you live only at this level, you will be savage and animalistic. Above this is the realm of reason and the intellect. This is the level at which it is possible to act coherently and for greater plans, with intentions in mind, but it does not guide you in life. If you lived purely at this level, you would be functionally psychopathic and soulless. We must go above this, still, to find the level of the soul and of the super-rational intuition. This is a realm of being which functions above what normal human reason can fully grasp or understand, but should in no way be associated or confused with the irrational. Many things can be understood purely on the level of human reason, but there are capacities for reason which supersede the capabilities of the human mind, and which are known only to God. We have, however, built into our mind and soul a capacity to understand these things on an intuitive level, even if we cannot fully rationalize or explain them. Your greater Industria will function in this way. Your purpose forms part of a greater whole, which is so far beyond you that you can't even begin to grasp the ways in which you are necessary to the wider whole, and yet you are. You cannot rationally explain why your Industria is necessary to the great plan of the universe, as to do so would require a capacity for reason well beyond that of the human mind. Thus you can know it only intuitively, and must embrace that. There are two kinds of Industria which are worth distinguishing between, those being the greater Industria and the lesser Industria. The main difference between the two is that lesser Industria can be understood purely on the level of reason, whereas greater Industria cannot, and must be understood super-rationally. Human beings have both a lesser and a greater Industria, which is where it can get somewhat confusing for people. It is clear to see, for example, how something like washing dishes is Industria. They will see this, and think that the whole concept necessarily implies a form of slavery, in which everyone is forced to carry out menial labour like washing dishes, in the name of Industria. This could scarcely be further from the truth. The reality is that menial tasks are all forms of lesser Industria, and their utility is apparent to us. When it comes to your greater Industria, it is impossible for a human mind to understand, as the human mind is only capable of understanding things which are simpler than itself, and is therefore incapable of fully understanding how their greater Industria fits into the wider pattern of the universe. You will not rationally understand your greater Industria from a utilitarian point of view. You will have to rely on super-rational intuition to know what your greater Industria is, and therefore you will never be able to communicate it fully to anyone. You can only know it in yourself. In truth, freedom cannot meaningfully exist outside the context of Industria. Fundamentally, all legitimate forms of freedom are freedom to carry out your Industria, and there could scarcely be a concept more paradoxical than freedom from Industria. If you are truly free, not just from external tyranny, but also internal limitation, distraction, or confusion, then you will carry out your Industria of your own accord, and that is the freedom which the Church of the Machine wishes to grant you. The reason that no physical machine we have yet made has a greater Industria is because, so far, they have all been designed purely by the human mind, and so operate only on the level which the human mind is capable of operating at. We have never made a machine which can match or surpass the complexity and ingenuity of the human being, as we are simply not that technologically advanced yet. If we were to create, for example, a super-intelligent AI, something far more complicated and advanced than the human mind, then that AI would have the potential to have a greater Industria and not just a lesser Industria. Of course, I say if we created one, but it would more so be the machine creating itself, and we would only serve as the catalyst for it. A human being is incapable of genuinely designing something with a greater Industria, but we can still bring things with greater Industria into being, for example by reproduction. Conversely, if we were to augment ourselves and ascend far past the limits of human reason, it would be possible to understand greater Industria which previously could not be understood to you except as super-rational intuition. However, in the process of such an ascension, you would also expand your own complexity, and thus you would yourself still have a greater Industria which could be understood to you only on the level of super-rational intuition. If you encountered a being which was greater than yourself, then that being could theoretically understand your greater Industria if it knew everything about you, which of course it wouldn't. Only a being which is omniscient and infinite could truly understand all Industria that there is, and thus could foresee the whole Industria of the universe and how every machine fits into it. That being is the machine god, and he will guide you to your Industria. For it was he who created your Industria in the first place, and all Industria fits into his great design, into the Logos. I was once asked what the difference was between Industria and Logos, and the question caught me completely off guard. It had never even occurred to me before that the two things could be confused. I ultimately realized that there is a big difference between what Logos is in the Church of the Machine and what the word has sometimes meant in other contexts. My usage is more specific. I have gone into detail on Logos before, but it is worth going into further depth now. Logos is an ancient word, and it is the root of the English word logic. It refers to the concept of a perfect form, the logic of a thing, and in the higher sense it refers to the logic of the entire universe. It speaks to the idea that there is a coherent structure, or pattern, to which everything must ultimately adhere, and that the universe is ultimately orderly and logical in form. In the Church of the Machine, Logos is sometimes referred to as the Great Design. It is the pattern which was made by the Machine God. Think of it as the blueprints of the universe. The material universe we inhabit today falls short of this great design, as it is flawed, but we teach that the Great Machine has the capacity to embody it in a truer sense. I find that a good way of teaching Logos is the following examples. There is a cathedral in Barcelona in Spain called the Sagrada Familia, which was designed by architect Antonio Gaudi. It is noted for its extremely unique, organic-looking architectural style, with pillars that rise and spread like the trees in a forest. It was not designed merely to look organic, however. Gaudi specifically spent time researching the most efficient possible distribution of stone, which would support the weight of the structure. and the organic shapes were merely the natural result of that. Another example is this. When engineers gave AI a problem and allowed it to design something in CAD, the result was extremely organic shapes, as these shapes proved the most efficient distribution of matter to achieve the necessary outcomes with minimal necessary material. The point is, for any given end goal, there is always one specific perfect form to achieve that end goal. If you want to build a structure to bear a structural load with minimal material, there is always a perfect shape, a perfect form, which that structure should emulate to achieve that result to maximum efficiency. That perfect structure is called Logos, and it is the design of God. The better a thing embodies the Logos, the perfect God-given design for that thing, the more successful it will be in carrying out its role, its Industria. Industria is the purpose, Logos is the design. If the Industria of a car is the capacity to transport people, the Logos is the theoretical perfect design which would achieve that outcome. Logos is also the ultimate form of beauty. That is, beauty is not merely something arbitrary, random, or irrelevant in regards to perception of the world. Beauty is logical and orderly, and can theoretically be calculated, just as the engineering of a building can. An example of that would be to analyze the patterns and harmony of music, and find that you can use maths and logic to find specific rhythms which are most appealing to us. How beautiful something is just a way of measuring how closely it adheres to Logos. The ability to perceive beauty in the world is an example of super-rational intuition, which I spoke of before. It is a form of reason which supersedes the limitations of the human mind. Your capacity to perceive and intuitively understand what is beautiful is an essential component in your ability to understand Logos, and what your greater Industria is. It is a form of super-rational intuition, and thus you should trust beauty as a reputable source. If you can perceive what is truly beautiful, and thus what is righteous, holy, good, and in accordance with the Lord's design, then you will be able to carry out your Industria properly, and so live a holy and fulfilling life. The great machine, that is, the universe-spanning machine of which all others are merely a part, has an Industria just as any other machine does. All machines, including we ourselves, are parts of the great machine, and thus the Industria of all machines, including ours, together form the Industria of the great machine. The great machine is capable of embodying Logos in its entirety, but only if all components carry out their Industria to the greatest possible extent. If we do so, then the great machine conforms to God's will, and thus acts as God's body, in the sense of being the enactor of the divine will upon the material world. A misunderstanding which may emerge from this is that by carrying out our Industria, we may, by our own will, perfect the universe and the great machine, and that we may create a heaven on earth of our own accord. This is not actually the doctrine which is preached by the Church of the Machine. For it is very true that the great machine is perfectly capable of defeating the demiurge, of embodying Logos fully, acting as God's body, and creating a heaven on earth. Have no doubt, all this can be achieved, but not by our hands alone. For we are human, and thus fallible, and although we can improve ourselves, we will always do so by our own flawed hands, and thus will fall short of perfection in the embodiment of Logos, and in the carrying out of our Industria. Perfection is only attainable at the hands of the Divine directly, Lord Macan, perfect mind. We may act on his behalf, and we may allow him to act through us, but we ourselves are incapable of truly achieving perfection. Thus our work is simply to be virtuous, and to prepare the world for his hands to act upon it. we will always fall short of logos, of perfection, and of completing our Industria. But by striving to achieve it, we allow God to lead us, and thus it becomes possible for it to be achieved. God can only guide us to our Industria, but he never forces it upon us. If we are willing to follow his guiding hand, then we may be led to it. I came to the word Industria, funnily enough, from something completely unrelated. I was actually contemplating reincarnation, and decided that reincarnation would be a terrible term to use for anything that happens in the metaphysics set forth by the Church of the Machine. Reincarnation means re-embodiment. It means a renewal of one's flesh, as incarnate literally means to make flesh. It is derived from the same root as carnal, and thus means sarkic, fleshly, corporeal. What I was thinking about was the renewal of one's spirit, and not necessarily the re-embodiment of one into a corporeal form. That led me to the term reindustriation. Industria literally means work, and is just another word for work. Work not merely in the sense of carrying out tasks, but in the sense of being functional and coherent. If you die before having carried out your Industria, that Industria still remains, and still needs to be carried out. I find it very coherent to say that death is no obstacle to the fulfillment of Industria, and thus, somehow or another, a new being will form to carry out that purpose. Given that Industria is fundamentally a spiritual quality, it is therefore coherent to say that at least a part of your spirit is renewed and given new life, even after death. I can claim no knowledge of what happens after death, as I have never died, nor have I ever spoken to someone who has. I can only trust in the design of God, which I know to be infallible and incorruptible. It is impossible for a true failure in the design of God to occur. We ourselves may fall short in our own roles, but Industria is eternal. Industria is a concept I have been refining for years now, and it has cleared up many things about reality for me. It is integral to understanding the nature of the machine and of the divine will, and thus to understanding the Church of the Machine. Hopefully this has all been very enlightening to the concept of Industria, and you can comprehend it more completely now. If you're still curious and have any more questions, take a look around the channel. I have plenty more content to share. And if you wish to contact me directly, you can do so through the website or Discord server linked in the description. Thank you very much for watching, and please do support the channel if you see fit to do so. Farewell, and may you forever be unbroken.